The late afternoon sun bathed the city park in golden light, glinting off the slides, swings, and laughing faces of children running about. For most parents, it was an ordinary Saturday outing, a chance to escape the week's wait and watch their kids play freely. But for Ethan Cole, one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs, this was more than just another trip to the park. It was his attempt at something he struggled with more than billion-dollar deals, being present for his son. Ethan had built an empire of real estate towers and luxury hotels, yet he couldn't seem to balance bedtime stories and morning pancakes. His wife's passing 3 years ago had left him both mother and father, though he often felt he was failing at both. So when his 6-year-old, Oliver, tugged at his sleeve earlier that afternoon and begged, "Daddy, can we go to the park? Please?" Ethan had closed his laptop, silenced his phone, and forced himself to say yes. At first, everything seemed perfect. Oliver's laughter rang like music as he chased a ball across the grass, his cheeks flushed with joy. Ethan sat on a bench nearby, finally letting himself smile, sipping his coffee and thinking maybe, just maybe, he was doing something right. But joy turned into dread in a single heartbeat. Ethan glanced down at his phone when it buzzed with a new email. It was barely 5 seconds, but when he looked up again, Oliver was gone. His heart skipped. He stood quickly, scanning the playground. Children darted in every direction, swings creaked, slides echoed with squeals, parents chatted distractedly, but his boy's curly brown hair was nowhere. "Oliver," he called, his voice tight but controlled. No response. He tried again, louder now, drawing the curious eyes of a few nearby parents. "Oliver." Panic clawed at his chest. His breaths grew shallow as he jogged toward the slides, then the sandbox, peering into every corner as if his son might appear from the shadows. His expensive watch dug into his wrist, and his tailored suit suddenly felt suffocating. None of it mattered, money, prestige, control, because in this moment, he wasn't a millionaire or a CEO. He was just a father who had lost his child. He ran across the grass, calling out his son's name again and again, his voice cracking now. What if he wandered off? What if someone, the thought made his stomach lurch. A woman pushing a stroller asked gently, "Are you looking for someone?" "My son," Ethan gasped, his voice breaking, "he's 6, brown hair, his name is Oliver." I just looked away for a second. The woman frowned sympathetically, shaking her head. "I haven't seen him." Ethan's chest tightened further. He sprinted toward the park's exit, eyes darting, searching every face, his own reflection of fear mirrored in strangers' eyes. His heart thundered so loudly it drowned out everything else. "Oliver," he shouted desperately, his voice raw now, echoing across the park. Then, just as his knees threatened to buckle under the weight of dread, his eyes caught something at the far end of the park. A small figure. His son. And he wasn't alone. Relief surged through Ethan like a wave crashing against rock. His trembling legs carried him forward as fast as they could, his eyes locked on the small figure at the far edge of the park. There was Oliver, safe, unharmed, nestled against the shoulder of a woman Ethan had never seen before. She sat on a weathered wooden bench, half hidden beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Her posture was calm, steady, as if she'd been waiting there for him. One arm circled gently around Oliver's back, the other brushing tenderly over the boy's curls. She wasn't restraining him, she was soothing him. Ethan slowed instinctively as he approached, breath ragged, torn between overwhelming relief and sharp suspicion. His instincts screamed to snatch his son away immediately, yet something about the scene made him pause. Oliver wasn't crying. He wasn't frightened. He was listening. The stranger was humming, a soft, lilting tune, almost like a lullaby. The kind his late wife used to sing when Oliver was a baby. The memory stabbed Ethan's chest, stopping him in his tracks. Oliver's little hands clutched the woman's cardigan, and his eyes, wide, trusting, looked up at her with surprising calm. His small voice carried faintly on the breeze. You sound like my mommy. Ethan's throat constricted. The woman looked up then, as if she had sensed Ethan's presence long before he arrived. Her eyes, deep, warm, and threaded with something unspoken, met his. She didn't look startled, nor guilty, nor defensive. Instead, she gave him a look that unsettled him far more, recognition. I'm his father, Ethan stammered, trying to steady his voice as he stepped closer. Oliver, come here. Oliver turned his head but didn't move from her lap right away. Daddy. I was scared when I didn't see you. But she found me. The stranger stroked his hair once more, then whispered something too low for Ethan to hear. Whatever she said made Oliver nod, releasing his hold. Only then did she let him slide down to the ground, where he bolted into Ethan's arms. Ethan knelt, clutching his son so tightly he feared he might never let go again. His relief was overwhelming, but mingled with confusion, questions burning in his mind. He looked back at the woman. She was still seated, calm, her hands folded now on her lap as if she had been waiting for this very moment. There was no sign of malice in her, yet there was something about her presence that tugged strangely at Ethan's memory, like a name on the tip of his tongue. Thank you, Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. But, who are you? The woman tilted her head, her gaze never breaking from his. A small, almost sorrowful smile touched her lips. Someone who was meant to find him, she said softly. The words unsettled Ethan. His pulse quickened again, though not from fear this time. Something about her tone felt deliberate, like she wasn't just talking about Oliver getting lost in a park, but something much deeper. And in that stillness, Ethan knew, this was no ordinary stranger. Ethan held Oliver tightly against his chest, his pulse still racing. The familiar warmth of his son's small arms around his neck was grounding, yet the unease gnawed deeper with every passing second. He turned back toward the woman, expecting her to rise, perhaps explain how she had found Oliver wandering alone. But she didn't move. She simply sat there beneath the oak tree, her calmness unnerving in the chaos of his emotions. The park sounds, the chatter of parents, the squeals of children, seemed to fade into the background until it was just the three of them suspended in that strange, quiet moment. Ethan finally found his voice. You said you were meant to find him. What does that mean? Do you know us? The woman's gaze softened. She stood then, slowly, as though careful not to frighten either of them. She was tall, dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, but there was an aura about her, something that carried weight beyond appearances. When she stepped closer, Ethan instinctively tightened his hold on Oliver, his protective instincts kicking in. But Oliver, instead of shying away, looked up at her again, as though he already trusted her more than a stranger should ever be trusted. She stopped just a foot away, her eyes locking with Ethan's. Then, lowering her voice to something only he could hear, she leaned closer. Her words were soft, almost like a secret carried on the wind. Your wife used to sing him the same lullaby every night. The one about the little star by the window. Ethan froze. His breath caught. His mind reeled. He hadn't heard anyone mention that lullaby in years, not since his wife, Emily, passed. It wasn't a song you'd find in books or music stores. It was something Emily had made up, a private little tune whispered in the stillness of bedtime. Only 3 people had ever known it existed, Emily, Ethan, and their son. Yet this woman had spoken of it effortlessly. Ethan's knees nearly gave way. His grip on Oliver tightened, his voice barely above a whisper as he choked out, How do you know that? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out slowly, not to touch him, but to rest her hand briefly over her own heart. Her eyes glistened, not with pity, but with something Ethan couldn't name. I promised her, she said finally, her voice steady though laced with emotion. I promised Emily I'd look after you both, if the day ever came that she couldn't. Ethan's heart thundered so loudly it felt as though the whole park could hear it. His wife's name on this stranger's lips sent shivers racing down his spine. He stumbled back a step, clutching Oliver tighter. Emily. What are you talking about? The woman didn't flinch at his disbelief. Instead, she lowered her gaze briefly, almost reverently, before meeting his eyes again. You don't remember me yet, she murmured. But you will. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly powerless, not to a market crash, not to a hostile takeover, but to the unraveling of something far greater, the truth he wasn't ready to face. And in that instant, he knew his life was about to change in ways money and logic could never explain. Ethan's world tilted. For a moment, he could hear nothing but the pounding of his own heart, feel nothing but Oliver's trembling body pressed into him. He wanted to dismiss the woman's words as coincidence, as some cruel trick, but deep down, he knew better. No stranger could have known about Emily's lullaby. He swallowed hard, his voice raw with disbelief. You knew my wife? The woman nodded slowly. Yes. I knew her better than most. Ethan searched her face desperately, trying to place her. But memory failed him. He'd met countless people through Emily, friends, colleagues, distant relatives, but this woman's face refused to anchor to any memory. And yet, there was something familiar about her eyes, something that carried the same quiet strength Emily had always had. Who are you? He demanded, his voice trembling between anger and fear. She took a breath, then sank back down onto the bench, gesturing gently for him to sit. Ethan hesitated, still clutching Oliver tightly, but Oliver tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, the boy whispered, she's nice. She helped me. Against every instinct screaming to walk away, Ethan sat, still on edge, his protective arms circling his son. The woman's gaze drifted toward the horizon, as though searching the memory of years past. Finally, she spoke. My name is Clara. Years ago, before you were married, I met Emily. We were both volunteers at a youth shelter on the east side of the city. She came every week, always smiling, always singing to the children there. That's where I first heard the lullaby. Ethan's breath caught. He remembered those days faintly, when Emily would leave on Saturday mornings with a bag of toys and books, returning hours later with her eyes glowing from helping strangers. She had spoken about a girl she mentored at the shelter, though she never said much, just that the girl had endured a hard life but had a spirit too strong to be broken. You. Ethan whispered, realization dawning. You're the girl. You're the one she talked about. Clara nodded, her eyes shining now. Emily saved me. I was 17, homeless, and angry at the world. I had no family, no direction. But she treated me like a little sister. She gave me food, clothes, even hope. More than that, she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. When she got sick, she made me promise something. She said, Clara, if anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll look after Ethan and Oliver in whatever way you can. Promise me you won't let them feel alone. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. The mention of Emily's illness was like ripping open an old wound, one he had stitched shut with work and denial. He remembered those nights in the hospital, her frail hand in his, her whispered reassurances that he and Oliver would be okay. But he never imagined she'd entrusted someone else with that same burden. Ethan shook his head slowly, overwhelmed. She never told me, she never mentioned. She didn't want to worry you, Clara said softly. You already carried so much. She told me herself that your way of loving was by protecting, by shielding. But she wanted someone to be there when protection wasn't enough. Oliver, sensing the heaviness but not fully understanding, leaned his head against his father's chest. Daddy, Mommy sent her to us. Ethan swallowed hard, unable to answer. His eyes locked on Clara's. Why now? Why here? Why today? Clara's gaze flickered down to Oliver, then back to Ethan. Because fate doesn't make mistakes. I wasn't meant to interfere until the moment came when you truly needed me. And today, she looked directly at him, her voice steady, "You needed me. You would have lost him." Ethan's chest tightened painfully. He thought of the seconds he'd wasted looking at his phone, the frantic terror of not seeing Oliver. For the first time in years, he admitted it to himself: money, power, influence, none of it could save him from the fragility of a single heartbeat, a single moment of loss. Clara leaned forward slightly, her expression both gentle and firm. "I didn't come to replace Emily. No one ever could. I came because she wanted you to know, you don't have to carry this alone anymore." The words hit Ethan like a blow and a bomb all at once. His throat ached, tears burned his eyes, but he found himself unable to speak. For the first time since Emily's death, he felt something stir inside him that had been buried too long, the possibility of healing. Clara's hand twitched slightly, as though she wanted to reach out but didn't dare. "You may not remember me fully yet. But one day soon, you will." Ethan held Oliver tighter, staring at her through blurred eyes, torn between disbelief and the undeniable truth that radiated from her. For the first time in years, he felt Emily's presence. Not in memory, not in a photograph, but alive, woven into the very moment unfolding before him. And it left him shaken to his core. For a long while, Ethan sat in silence, holding Oliver close, staring at Clara as though she were both a stranger and a piece of his past come back to life. He wasn't sure if he believed in fate, or destiny, or miracles, but sitting here, under the oak tree, he couldn't deny that something greater than coincidence had led this woman to his son. Oliver, with his usual childlike simplicity, broke the silence first. "Daddy," he whispered, tugging at Ethan's sleeve, "can we say thank you? She helped me." Ethan blinked, swallowing the lump in his throat. He turned to Clara. I don't even know where to start. You saved him. You," his voice cracked. He had stood in front of boardrooms of ruthless investors without flinching, but now, in front of this woman, words deserted him. Clara smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You don't owe me thanks. I was just keeping my promise." Ethan's chest ached at that word, promise. He thought of Emily, her hand slipping from his on that hospital bed, her last words of reassurance. And now, this woman standing before him, carrying those words forward like a torch through the darkness. Still, he struggled with disbelief. "All this time, you knew about us, but you never came forward." "I watched from a distance," Clara admitted quietly. "I saw the articles in the papers, your name in the headlines. You were raising Oliver, building an empire, holding everything together. I didn't think you needed me. But when I saw Oliver today, lost, scared, I knew it was time." Her honesty disarmed him. There was no arrogance, no attempt to insert herself into their lives. Just sincerity. Ethan looked down at Oliver, who was now playing with the buttons of his suit jacket, blissfully unaware of the storm raging in his father's heart. He thought of how easily he could have lost him today. The fear was still raw, sharp as glass. He thought of Emily's trust, her faith that someone would be there if he faltered. And maybe, just maybe, this woman was the answer to that unspoken prayer. He cleared his throat, steadying his voice. "Clara. I don't know what role you're supposed to have in our lives. I don't know if I'm ready to trust anyone again." He paused, the weight of his next words heavy. "But I do know I can't ignore what happened today. You were there when I needed you most. And maybe that means something." Clara's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. She didn't push, didn't ask for more. She simply nodded, her expression one of quiet understanding. Oliver wriggled out of Ethan's arms then and walked over to Clara with his usual innocence. "Do you want to play with me?" he asked, holding out his hand. The simplicity of the gesture nearly undid Ethan. Children didn't question motives or carry the burdens of the past, they just trusted. And in that moment, Ethan realized Oliver had already accepted her in a way he himself was still struggling to. Clara crouched down to Oliver's level, her voice gentle. I'd love to, if your daddy says it's okay. Oliver turned to Ethan, his wide brown eyes pleading. Please, Daddy. Just for a little. Ethan exhaled slowly. The walls he had built around his life since Emily's death, walls of grief, guilt, and relentless work, were cracking. He gave a small, almost reluctant smile. Just for a little, he said. Oliver beamed and pulled Clara toward the swings. She followed with a quiet laugh, her expression soft, as though the simple joy of being invited into this child's world was more than enough. Ethan stayed on the bench, watching them. His son's laughter mingled with Clara's voice, and for the first time in years, the sound didn't ache, it healed. He leaned back, the golden light of the setting sun warming his face, and let himself breathe. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or how this unexpected bond would grow. But for the first time since losing Emily, he felt something new take root inside him. Hope. And as Oliver swung higher, reaching for the sky, Ethan realized that maybe, just maybe, fate had brought Clara back into their lives not just to keep a promise, but to remind them that love, in its many forms, never truly dies. The story didn't end with loss. It was beginning again, with a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all, and a whisper that had changed everything.